Alright guys, I'm back in the garage again just after this morning where I've got a bit of damage to the rear diff. Get in there and start looking at what might be wrong. This screw from this brace, and that way that'll be free, and then we turn the car over and get your hex driver and just remove these 4 screws at the back. Okay, so as you guys are aware, I've been driving in the sand, so this is as it was from this morning. I'm just showing you me taking it apart, so let's see if there's any sand or anything inside. Okay, so that's the inside of the diff. This is one of the ones, once again, that I haven't serviced myself. This is straight out from the factory. I rebuilt the front one before, but yeah, as you can see, we've definitely got sand got in, so I'm not super happy about that, but I should have really taken the time to service those diffs before I drove this car. So what I'm expecting to find here is some missing teeth, but I'm hoping that I can salvage the gear set. So I'm going to put new bearings and put this all back together, shim it up, and I think we'll be right. Okay, next I'm actually removing the hinge pin brace on the front of the rear diff, so just so that I can get to the input drive cup, I've got to get that off the bearing to get the bearings out. So normally I wouldn't need to take this off, but in this case I do. So I've just noticed also that I've got a broken A-arm drive back. So one of the ways to get these input drive cups off when they're fresh from the factory is just to heat the Loctite up, and it should start to melt it. Just got to be really careful not to melt any of the plastic. Okay, there we go. And as you can see, there's our problem. That's just absolutely destroyed that bearing. So I'm not a massive fan of the stock Arrma bearings. They tend to kind of not last the best, and most guys that are serious will replace these before they even drive. Yeah, so just as I was filming that there, I've noticed that this piece here is cracked. Usually upgrade these with a GKA. Okay, so there's plenty of ways that you can remove sway bar link on the rear of the car, and one of them is just to take out those 2 screws, but the problem with that is you can't really get it off the car, especially if it's on the chassis, so when you're removing these rear diff. So what I do, and may not be the most pretty thing, but I just remove this. So grab a flat blade screwdriver and just pop that link off. That way you've got that free, and then when you remove the gearbox cover screws, the sway bar link just comes out with the cover. So I've removed the 4 screws on the gearbox cover there, and just, if you very gently just get a flat blade in and just pop that cover a little bit, it'll just come off really easy. So as you can see, there's plenty of sand in there, a little bit of metal shavings, which is obviously indication of something's been grinding. So if you see a lot of that, it's probably time to change your gears out. But yeah, that's a stock gearbox that hasn't been shimmed, that's straight out of the factory. So you can see that that bearing's just disintegrated also. So I'll be replacing all those bearings, this one as well. And obviously once you get those bits of bearing, the balls in around those gears, you're very likely to have an issue because something's going to get stuck. Sand, probably not a great thing to have in your mesh either. The internal gears feel alright. When I pull that apart, I'll check the level of the diff and maybe even shim it. I definitely recommend shimming the mesh between this gear and the input drive gear. Get this cleaned up a bit and I'll show you a little more inside. Once you kind of got everything as clean as you can, everything's nearly there. We've sort of got most of the dirt and the grease outside and the sand. One of the things I recommend you guys maybe look into is this. It's called cleaning gum. It's sort of like a blue tack, but my mate Jay at Walter Hobbies recommended it to me, and at first I was sort of not real convinced, but I use it all the time, and it just comes in this big blob. You just break off a piece, and yeah, you start working it into the part that you want to clean. So I thought I'd show you the inside of the diff. So that's how much oil was in it. I don't know if you can kind of see, it's pretty dry. Right down at that sort of the bottom there's no oil. So that's obviously one of the problems when we don't check these things when we first get these cars. So yeah, it's not too bad, but it's pretty low. Alright, so one of the things I do with these is if you carefully just remove that whole assembly like that, you don't have to really do anything. You can kind of just keep it together. Alright, so one of the things I do is just get needle nose pliers either side of that gear and then just gently wiggle it, and it will come off like that. Then you can get your needle nose again and just carefully remove that pin, and then pull your outdrive cup out slowly. Now there's an O-ring at the bottom there. Now just double check that that's okay before you put the diff back together. That one looks alright, so I'll reuse that. Okay, one of the other things I've been doing lately is actually shimming this gear with some wheel axle shims. And what I do is just start with usually 3 and up to 4 of these. So these are 8 by 10 by a 0.2, I think. But yeah, you can see that there's 4 there, so I'm gonna try 3 to start with. Now what you do is just sit them on this big main diff gear there, get your bearing and put that on, and as you can see, it actually pushes the bearing out a little bit, stops it from going all the way in. So what that does is actually tension the mesh. So it's a little bit more involved to remove shims than what the Techno shim method is, but what I like about it is that you don't have the issue of pushing the diff back into the gearbox case. It just goes in so easy. I always had problems with the shims, the Techno shims. I'd bend them and wreck them. So this way I don't have that problem at all. Now I did this in the last sort of maintenance video that I showed you guys, but I just put a lot of grease on stuff because I drive in sand a fair bit. I like to make sure that all my bearings and diff is just completely sealed with grease. It kind of stops the dust and stuff getting into things. So anyway, that's what I do, and I'll put some there. With the shims, you only do it on this side. Don't put it on the diff cup side, because you're wanting to push the mesh that way onto your input drive gear. So start with 3. Try that once you put the diff case back together, and see how it goes. Now one of the tips, always remember to put your bearings back on first. So when you're rebuilding a diff, it's very easy to get distracted and you'll put things together and then forget that you haven't actually put your bearings on the diff cup. So this side is obviously done because I've put the shims in, but yeah, on this side, same thing. I'll just put a little bit of grease around everything and put our bearing on. So that's the most important step. Remember, put your bearings on first. because it's a pain to have to pull everything apart later. At this point, you need to decide whether or not you're going to shim your diff, and I am going to probably put one Mugen Seiki large shim over the O-ring. I think it just protects the bottom of the O-ring in that section. So the shims that I use are the E0206 and the Mugen Seiki diff washer set for the MBX. Okay, so that's the larger flat washer. So I just carefully push that in. You can use a socket or something like that to sort of fit it down, even just that. Okay, now grab your pin, and push that in. Okay, try and get that kind of centered. Now just turn that and it should slot in and fall in. There we go, so that's done. So the shim's in. Double check your bearings on and just get a feel, make sure that feels okay, there's no grit or dirt or anything stuck in it.